One.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the GD Report. I am D.
And I'm G. Welcome,
Great to
everybody.
great to see everybody, and glad to have you watching and listening on all your favorite podcast channels. We're working on getting added to a few more networks, and so we'll have more news about that soon. We're going to start off today. We've got just a packed show. It's been a few days since we talked. We are sitting now at where's my count now? Well, we're sitting at 55 days and 20 hours until the inauguration. So fast approaching where we're going to have a new administration. We're going to talk about that transition. But before we jump into that, we've got a couple of in memoriams that we'd like to do here at the first of the show. Sometimes we'll do them at the end and they kind of get rushed around a little bit. But G-Man, why don't you tell us about a couple of notable passings this week?
Yeah, so earlier this week, David Dinkins, the first Black mayor of New York City, died at 93. Dinkins, gave hope to Black Americans that they could overcome decades, if not centuries of discrimination. He was one of the greatest mayors of New York history. Did a great job. Broke the color barrier. He managed to defeat a three-term incumbent, Ed Koch, during the Democratic primary. So he was one of the first to primary a sitting mayor, and then went on to win. And interesting, do you know the person he beat in the general election?
Rudolph Giuliani.
Sideburn Rudy. It's sad to see him.
Just for Rudy in the hair care section.
Right, just for Rudy. It's sad to see him pass, and he'll be missed. But he died at 93, so that's a good long life. And the other one, it doesn't have much to do with politics, but which is the main focus of our show. But soccer legend Diego Maradona passed today at 60. So we just wanted to acknowledge that as well.
Absolutely. So let's talk about, and both those are sad passings. And Mayor Dinkins, as you mentioned, just what a trailblazer. And even though he reached the heights of the mayor's office, still dealt with a lot of racial discrimination. And Giuliani came back and beat him when they ran again, when
Right.
Dinkins ran for re-election, and a lot of racial overtones to that election. But Dinkins was just a class act all the way, and really showed what was possible to have one of the highest profile African American leaders at the time. So
Right.
definitely will be missed. Let's talk. Speaking about transitions and elections, let's talk about the Biden transition and what's been happening in the last week.
Absolutely. Well, the GSA, who controls the funds for the transition team, finally acquiesced and sent the letter over acknowledging that Biden is the winner and releasing the funds, about $7 million, so they can go ahead and start the transition. They can get access to the various government agencies. They can find out exactly what's been going on the last 4 years, who's in what spots. More importantly, they can get a sense of who they need to fire in the upcoming months to get the country back on track and out of this chaos that it's been in for the last 4 years.
Yeah, I found. Do you think the GSA administrator is going to be kept on?
Biden, I think, has a big heart, but I'm not sure that. And her name is Emily Murphy.
Yeah, I'm kidding. I think she's gonna, unless she gets in a right wing circle, she's gonna struggle to find gainful employment.
Right. Although she did send a really kind of heartfelt letter to Biden, and she closed it with, basically asking Congress to fix the flaws in the 1960s era law that created this transition.
Some of that law was updated though back in 2000. after the Gore Bush transition, or
Right.
actually it was a transition from Clinton to Bush. But I will say this about her letter: as much as there was some heartfelt sentiments in it, and I know maybe I'm cold-hearted, uh, but she had a statement in there where she said, "No one from the executive branch ordered me either not to or to comply or with the ascertainment clause." And I made this decision solely on my own. And then about 30 minutes later, Trump tweeted out that he had instructed her to cooperate.
Right.
So
So what do you think happened there? Because what I heard a lot of pundits were saying was that she made the decision, and from what I understand, she informed the White House on Friday that she was going to on Monday release the funds.
I don't believe that. I don't believe that she made any decision. I think she waited for instructions, and I think that
Trump's chief of staff
yeah, I think his chief of
pulled it.
staff and some of his advisors have gotten to him on the PR front.
Right.
I think that the only thing that guy really cares about is his own public relations.
Right.
And so the only way you make a case to him is the fact that if you say this is going to hurt you long term, if you don't
Right.
start cooperating with it, and I think they gave the order at that point.
Right. Well, and by all accounts, and I think this comes as no shock to anybody that's been following this for a while. Uh, we haven't heard the last of Mr. Trump, and my guess is, and just about everybody else that follows this, it's their guess as well, that come 2024, there will be a Trump in the Republican primary. So, and possibly even Donald J.
Right.
So,
And we'll see what Mother has to say about that.
right, absolutely. Yeah, that's going to set up an interesting dynamic, isn't it? Because Pence wants to be president, and
Well, Pence and about 10 other folks do. And
right,
so the question is, are they going to be anybody going to be brave enough to challenge he or the progeny?
right,
He's definitely going to sit back and try to be a kingmaker of their party. And so it's going to put people like the Lincoln Project and George F. Will and Bill Kristol, some of those folks in a really interesting squeeze, because
right,
they were anticipating a full-scale repudiation of Trump. And by all accounts, it was a landslide victory for Biden. I mean, the guy
right,
won by 6 million votes. He's topped 80 million votes now, which is the most votes anybody's ever gotten for president. But you still had, 72, 73 million people that voted for Trump.
right,
And so what it does is it puts those never Trumpers in a box, because, George F. Will, I remember what he said. He's about as good a prognosticator as Ted Cruz was about coronavirus. But
right,
he said, come November 4th, people are going to start forgetting the name Donald Trump. And the
yeah,
Republican Party is going to be put in a little bit of a timeout, and they'll come back stronger without Donald Trump. Donald Trump's not going anywhere. Whether he runs in 2024, I don't know personally if he's willing to put himself through the rigors of campaigning, because I don't think he doesn't. He likes the rallies, but he doesn't like the job. But I think
right,
he'd love to sit back and be a kingmaker. I think he'd love to get Russian investment and buy like Newsmax or something to compete against Fox News, and just sit
right.
back and be a pundit.
Yeah, I mean, I know Eric Jr. or Don Jr. and Eric both have political aspirations, and then Eric's wife Laura has announced that she's going to run for the open Senate seat in 2022 in North Carolina, where she's from. So I don't think we've heard the end of the Trumps at all. And I think you might be onto something there about trying to buy Newsmax, because the rumor was that he was going to start his own TV network, obviously right wing and based on a lot of conspiracies, kind of like OAN.
Right.
But I don't think he's going away. And it was pretty interesting. There was one story out. I think I'm going to send it to you, that said Trump is fighting hard to hold on to a job that he doesn't even want to do. And
Right.
by all accounts, in the last 4 years, he didn't do much. I mean, his
Right.
supporters think he's this great president, but when you boil it down and you look at what he's done, there's a handful of things that he got done. But most, moving the embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, things like that. Getting a couple of down ballot Middle Eastern countries to agree to peace with Israel. But by and large, he didn't get a lot of stuff done.
Right. And, I'm sure, like you said, we would get a lot of argument from his supporters. But I mean, the guy, most accounts of his day, doesn't go to the Oval Office till around 10 a.m., stays in bed and watches TV. And
Right,
then by 5, 6 o'clock, he's bored to tears. He's back in a residency watching TV
right,
and eating Big Macs and taco bowls and KFC. And it's like, to not have to go through the rigors of the job and be able to sit back and be a pundit and try to be a kingmaker, to a guy like Trump, I think that appeals more. Now, there's definitely ego involved where he may want to try to quote unquote avenge his loss, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I mean, we talked about this, I think, last week. I don't anticipate a concession of any kind from him. I
no,
don't anticipate he'll even be at the inauguration. He won't go through the ceremonial ride to Capitol, all those kinds of things that presidents of the past have done.
right,
I don't anticipate him doing that. Since the election, he's barely done anything but play golf. He's played
right.
golf. He came out yesterday in the White House briefing room and did, I think it was like 54 seconds. It was the length of the press conference. And he
Right.
talked about how the Dow had hit, above
30,000.
30,000, and it was a monumentous day, and it was all thanks to him, and blah blah blah. He failed to mention the fact that the market was overjoyed about the fact that the transition was taking place. It was a peaceful transition, and the fact that Biden is considering Janet Yellen for Treasury Secretary.
Right,
The stability of those kinds of things. So obviously the transition's moving forward, which is good news for our country. Um, no matter what the outcome, you want a smooth transition. And Trump can say that he's trying to punish the Democrats because last time he didn't get a smooth transition. Nothing could be further from the truth. And
right,
it doesn't shock us again that the guy's lying, but he was hosted at the White House within a few days of the election. President Obama had him at the White House. They did a full debriefing for him. They ascertained he was the winner. They started the transition. Hillary Clinton gave a concession speech the next day. I mean, it couldn't be further from the truth for Trump. But again, he's gonna say his version of the truth, and his followers are gonna believe it, no matter what the
right.
facts. You're not gonna let the
Yep,
facts get in the way of a good story.
absolutely. Let me ask you something. If I'm remembering this correctly, didn't Eisenhower, when he got elected, didn't he leave Harry and Bess Truman in the White House and didn't ride over with them as tradition dictates?
Yeah, I think you may be right on that. But they did have them at the White House, but I think they may have rode separately to the ceremony.
Right,
And that might have been Harry as much as it was Ike.
right, because they,
Harry was super disappointed that Ike ran as a Republican.
right, yeah,
So,
well,
obviously within the transition, Biden has named his foreign policy designates for appointments there. A really interesting mix of career folks who've worked in the foreign services over time. I was impressed with the speeches yesterday. I don't know if you had to watch any of the speeches, but I was impressed. It just felt again like we had some adults back in charge.
right. Well, a couple of things that have impressed me so far. One, now we'll see if he follows through on this, but there's talk that he's going to name a Native American to run the Department of Interior, which would be very historic on a lot
Absolutely.
of levels. And then he created a new cabinet post. So for those that don't know, President Trump elevated the UN ambassador position to cabinet level when he named Nikki Haley to that spot. And President-elect Biden has now created a basically an environmental czar position. I can't remember the exact title on that. Do you know,
I think
Chris?
it's special envoy to the president for the climate.
Yeah. and that's a cabinet level position. And he named John Kerry, former Secretary of State, correct?
That's exactly
And
right.
Kerry has a lot of experience dealing with other countries. And in Kerry's speech, when they announced this position, he said, America needs to get back to the point where it's leading the world and showing the world what can be done and bringing other countries on board to do what needs to be done to get us over this crisis that we're in because of the changing environment. And I thought that was just awesome. So,
Yeah, and one thing that people overlook about John Kerry is throughout his role in the Senate, and then in obviously a presidential candidate, but then also as the Secretary of State that you mentioned, he's been a leader on the environment,
right,
and he's been a leader on climate change. He's been involved in almost every major negotiated treaty. He was involved in the Paris Accord. Obviously, was instrumental in the negotiations on different topic, but on the Iranian nuclear deal as well. And so he brings a wealth of knowledge about the topic. And I'm emboldened that as a country we're going to finally get real about it.
yeah, me too. Now, it's interesting how you kind of look at things, but depending on how those two Senate seats turn out in Georgia, it could be a rough couple years. So Democrats need to start looking at 2022. Last I checked, there was a decent amount of Republican seats up. They need to hold the line on where they're at, and they need to gain some ground in the Senate. And then as soon as that's over, they need to start thinking about 2024 and who is going to run for president and what kind of coattails they're going to have.
Right. Well, and I think yeah, I think you're dead on those things. I will say this though, there's been a lot of talk about Marco Rubio was in the news, and Ted Cruz has been in the news quite a bit as well. They've been flapping their gums about not wanting to let Biden have his picks for his cabinet positions
Right.
and wanting to block his cabinet choices. And I found it interesting that Rubio in particular was describing them as a bunch of Ivy League elites, considering that Rubio went to an Ivy League college as well.
Right.
So it's funny how that works for against one side, but not for the other.
Right.
It's also Rubio. We'll talk about Georgia in a minute, but Rubio also was very critical of the Reverend Raphael Warnock's religion and talking about his faith and his beliefs when and talking about the clips that he had and called him radical and all these things. But yet Rubio was the one decrying a little over a month ago that Amy Coney Barrett's religion shouldn't have anything to do with someone's appointment to a position or run for office.
Right. And wasn't Warnock's wasn't a couple of the quotes that Rubio was picking on him for came directly from the Bible?
Yeah, they were variations of the Beatitudes by Christ.
Right.
Basically where it said man can't serve God and mammon, or man can't serve God. And he talked about the military, he talked about other things, he talked about you can only serve one God was the
Right.
point, which we've seen that before with it's a classic playbook for African American candidates is to criticize their preachers. In this case, he happens to be the preacher, but we saw it with Obama where they criticized Reverend Wright and some of the things that he
Right.
said, and
And then
took a
turned
lot.
around and said he wasn't Christian, that he was Muslim.
I know, took a lot of his quotes out of context too. So
Yeah.
more of the do as I say, not as I do Republican Party of today. One of the last point on the cabinet appointees, I was really excited about Antony Blinken, who's going to be the new
Secretary of
Secretary of
State.
State. He told I don't know if you've heard the story he told about his, I believe it was his stepfather that was held in a concentration camp in Poland, I believe. And as a child, he was one of 900 students from his elementary school to the concentration camps. And of the 900, he was the only child to survive.
Oh wow.
And,
No, I haven't heard that.
and at one point late in the war, he escaped from the concentration camp and made a run for it. And he came upon a tank. And rather than having the Iron Star of the Nazis on it, it had a white 5-point star, which was a U.S.
Right.
Tank. the latch on the tank opened, and an African American GI stepped out and told him to halt. And the little boy went down to his knees, and he said the only 3 words in English he knew, which is what his grandmother taught him, which was "God bless America." And he was saved, and being saved then helped transform who's going to be our Secretary of State uh, into the position he is and the love he has for America. And he said that's the emblem that the world knows of America: as liberators
Right.
and fighters for justice and fighters for peace around the world.
Right.
And so I'm excited about having people like that, as opposed to someone like Mike Pompous Pompeo in office, who only cares about Trump and his own ego,
Right.
and somebody who's a politician who just wants to get sound bites and things like that. So
Right. Well, talking about Reverend Warnock is a good transition to our next topic. It seems like we know that in Georgia there have been a lot of election um, uh, shenanigans, I guess is the best word, going on, going back to the gubernatorial race 2 years ago when they basically stole it from Stacey Abrams. Brian Kemp did that. They finally have a Republican that grew a backbone and defended the race and defended the count against immense pressure. But now there's some more stuff going on. So why don't you fill us in on that, Dee?
absolutely. Well, the Republican Party, by all accounts that I'm seeing, they are running scared in Georgia, because they recognize that the momentum is really on the Democratic side, because people are Republicans are super disappointed that Trump lost. Trump has stoked anger against the sitting Republican officials, including the Secretary of State Raffensperger and Brian Kemp. Georgia just has got to be a conundrum for them, because in a lot of the other states, they have Democratic governors they can blame. Same thing in Nevada, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan. They leave out the point that there's Republican legislatures, but they at least have a Democratic governor that they can blame. Georgia, there's nobody to blame, because it's a Republican governor who's a huge supporter of Trump, and then also a Republican Secretary of State, who actually came out in an article today and said that he feels totally betrayed by Trump, because he said he was a Trump supporter. He voted for Trump, and he feels like Trump threw him and his family under the bus because they're receiving death threats now, all because he stood for the rule of law.
Right.
But the state election board met last week, or this past, the holidays messing my days up. This past Monday, they met to try to pass 3 emergency rules for the runoff, because we get the runoff on January 5th.
Right.
So they, one rule which passed was extending the monitoring of drop boxes and adding video recording as part of the security process for drop boxes for extra security. That passed pretty easily.
Right.
The second rule shortened when counties can begin processing the ballots from 2 weeks to 1 week, 1 week and a day before the election. But it also allowed them to, it changed the scanning of absentee ballots from county's discretion to requiring them to begin scanning those ballots into the counting system before election day. So we should have results a lot sooner.
Right.
The third rule they tried to pass, though, was you mentioned shenanigans and tomfoolery, whatever you want to call it. But this was actually a rule they tried to sneak through about residency requirements. And what they were trying to do with this was make it easier for absentee ballots to be challenged. And they wanted to force that if a ballot was challenged, they wanted to force a registrar to track down addresses. They were just putting all these different things, and it would amount to a modern day poll tax
Right.
to try to disenfranchise these particular voters, and whether they'd actually paid a tag tax, all these different things, that was voted down. But everybody knows it was just an excuse to try to back up a conspiracy theory that didn't happen. It's like going in after the fact. And so when you start to see some of these actions, you start to see some of the commercials that Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue are running.
Right.
I feel like that they must have some internal poll numbers that show that they're struggling. The latest New York Times poll has the race dead even on both races. Warnock 49-48 over Loeffler, and then Ossoff Perdue 48-48. Now, a couple things about those, obviously well within the margin of error. And then also, I'm going to be quite honest on these statewide polls. I don't have a lot of faith after the last
Yeah,
the
I'm
last
with you there.
election and the senatorial races.
Yeah.
Something happened either with those polls or with the elections themselves, because to see such a broad disparity of people who were in the lead and had in some cases insurmountable leads, I don't have a lot of faith in the polling. I do have faith in Stacey Abrams that she's going to get out the vote. It's a
Right.
big push to get out the vote with the youth voters, but David Perdue keeps making news, and it's not for the right reasons. There was more details in the New York Times this week about more stock trades where he was already under investigation for $1 million in stock that he sold from a firm that was involved in the pandemic results. And so
Right.
getting access to the early intelligence about how bad the pandemic was, he sold a bunch of stock. And then also now he's made news for the fact that while he sat on a committee overseeing naval contracts and contracting with for naval equipment, he also had stock in those companies.
Right.
And so he is being investigated. I think the Justice Department is considering at least reopening that investigation, but it sure does not look good for a sitting senator to have these types of investigations going on. And
Right.
he's refused to debate John Ossoff again. He will not debate him. But I know at least one debate is going to go forward without Mr. Perdue, even if he chooses not to. So Ossoff will get the full amount of time.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, I heard Raffensperger and maybe Kemp as well talking about cautioning people about moving to Georgia just to vote. And so, a lot of states have a 1-day residency, 30-day residency requirements. So I thought it'd be interesting to see what Georgia requires. And so on their page about how to become a Georgia resident, the first thing they say is you have to establish a residence. So you do that by either buying a home or signing a lease. The second thing is you obtain a Georgia driver's license. And you get that by bringing your current driver's license, proof of your social security number, proof of identity such as your passport or birth certificate, and 2 documents proving Georgia residency, such as a signed lease, a utility bill, or a bank statement. And then, to register your vehicle, you have to have proof of insurance and proof of ownership. And then to become a registered voter, you have to meet the basic residency requirements. And then you have to, there's some other things that you can do, like changing your IRS status and things like that. But it seems like it's not insurmountable, but fairly problematic to establish a short-term residency just to vote.
Yeah. What do you think? I don't see those a lot of people doing that. There is a good amount of, I think at least 500,000 potential new voters that have turned 18 since the last requirement.
Right.
So they're eligible to register. And I know there's a big push to do that. What do you feel like? How do you feel Trump not being on the ballot is going to affect the turnout on the Republican side?
Well, when he was still fighting to retain his seat in the White House, I think there was a decent amount of optimism. But the thing that's kind of shocked me in the last few days is he's just disappeared. I mean, he's tweeted a little bit, but not nearly as much as before the election. And he's, like you said, he did that, 30-second or 90-second, whatever it was, press conference the other day about the Dow, and then he had a minute or two where he pardoned 2 turkeys Well, I guess he pardoned one and shipped the other one off with him. But
I
you know,
think
he just
yeah, I think the next turkey he's going to pardon is named Michael Flynn.
right. And if he doesn't go down to Georgia, which where's the inclination for him to do that? If he doesn't go down to Georgia and campaign for those guys, then I think they're going to have a difficult, but not not insurmountable, but a difficult path to reelection. And I
Yeah.
think they know that. What wasn't there a call transcript leaked where they basically were saying, we need him to fight to come down here and help fight for us and that kind of stuff. I don't recall the
Yeah, I remember hearing that. I don't remember exactly where it came from, but I do remember hearing that. I this is going to be a turnout vote, and it's going to be a turnout race,
right,
and the question is who's going to be most emboldened to turn out their voters. I understand that Biden and Harris may be going to campaign to help get their vote out. I think Harris would be super smart if they could get Obama to go
right,
back. I think that would be great for their counties that they're trying to get the highest turnout in. But
right,
I could see a large amount of Trump voters being disgusted with the Republican Party in
right,
Georgia, feeling like they didn't fight hard enough for Trump,
right.
and then just saying, um, I'm going to set this one out. Now, I did see another. We talked a little bit about off the air about some things happening in Florida and some of the shenanigans going on there with different candidates. I did see a thing online, and it started with a satire writer that I enjoy, but he was starting a movement that said, if you're sick and tired of Democrats in D.C., Georgia Republicans on January 5th, write in Donald J. Trump on your ballot as senator.
Right. Well, if as we've said all along, Trump isn't a Democrat or Republican. He's a Trump,
Right.
and that's all he cares about. And I think if you're a Republican voter and he doesn't come down to campaign for those two Senate seats, that's got to be a telling sign to tell you the guy cares nothing about politics, party politics. He just cares about himself. And and I don't expect him to go. I mean, where's the incentive? I mean, I
Yeah.
guess he could play Augusta, you know, but other than that, I don't see him going down there. I don't see him. I think he's in full on pout mode because somebody took his presidential seal away come January, and I don't expect him to do much, but pack up and leave and go to face whatever criminal charges are coming.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, we went a little long on both those topics. That's getting us a little bit close on time on this episode. So we'll have to catch up on some of our other topics again soon. We've got some really good ones with particularly with some of the things happening in treaties and some last minute things that Trump is trying to accomplish before he gets out of office. So
Right.
I encourage everybody in the state of Georgia, be sure and get out and register to vote. Everybody else, it's Thanksgiving week. Please, if you're out in public, wear a mask. Avoid large congregations of people. I'm really worried that this is going to be a super spreader weekend, and we're going to end up with bigger numbers than we even have.
Yeah. Well, we already lead the world in the numbers, so let's try to keep them as low as we can. So,
Yeah.
happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Take care.
Bye bye.